Be seated, please. First, thank you for accepting some flexibility and changing the order of the service. Usually we have a Dvar Torah earlier, but we had the privilege this morning to have a guest speaker. We did it in Partners in Torah. As you know, in Partners in Torah, no, it's not Café con Torah, but it's in English. In Café con Torah, what we try to do is to link the content of the parasha with or me teaching something or having a guest speaker. So I imagine that you find out that in the parsha we find one of the earliest argument of anti-Semitism, which is Pharaoh, number one, didn't know Joseph. No, he forgot everything that Joseph did for him. And we mentioned in the other room, the same happened in so many countries in the world. Poland, 1,000 years of Jewish life in Poland. When the Nazis decided to come, say, please come here. You can build your concentration camp, kill them, no problem. What, 1,000 years, I work for you. Doesn't matter. And we can go on and on in the entire globe. But also in the parsha of the week, we have Avanit Hakmalach. Let's be wiser than them because the Jews are growing so fastly, so quickly. So we need to get rid of them. Let's kill them. We have the privilege of having this Shabbat Dr. Ariel Gelblung, which is the head of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Latin America. Everybody knows who Simon Wiesenthal was. When the war was over, he dedicated his life to hunt Nazis, but he knew, like the doctor just told us, that nature, biology will take care of the Nazis. They will die, but the virus of Nazism will continue. So we have organizations who, and he's not only an expert, but he's, I would say, the hunter of anti-Semitism in our days in Latin America. And I asked him to give us a report of what's going on. He's a permanent visitor of United Nations there, looking, trying to lobby with different Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they accomplish amazing things. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest speaker, Ariel Gelblung, to the Bima.
Thanks. Shabbat Shalom. I feel honored and privileged with this opportunity of being here in front of you this Shabbat morning. I want to thank Rabbi Mario Rosman and the entire community for allowing me to share some thoughts of the current panorama of anti-Semitism in Latin America that constitutes our daily work. My name is Ariel Gelblung, and I have been bestowed with the honor to lead the Latin American office of the Wiesenthal Center since 2015. The center, founded in 1977 and headquarters in LA, continues the work of the great Simon bequeathed to us. Seeking the Nazis to bring them to justice was the result of being an international Jewish human rights organization that denounced racists, xenophobes, discriminators, anti-Semites, and terrorists who tried to attack coexistence in diversity. We have to be the institution that didn't exist in 1930 in order to prevent such freaks for assuming positions of power. The usual prejudice that prevails in Europe and North America about Latin America consists of imagining an homogeneous and underdeveloped region that has served as refugee for Nazis after the Second World War, guaranteeing their impunity. The lack of a judicial resolution of the 1992 terrorist attacks by Hezbollah against the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, the subsequent attack of the headquarters of the Jewish Community Center AMIA in 1994 in the same city, with together exceeded 100 fatalities, immediately followed by the downing of the plane in Panama the day after AMIA, with almost 30 deaths, to which we must add the 2015 death of prosecutor Nisman the night before the expected statement before the Argentine Congress, to denounce possible complicity to people related to the government contribute to deepen the aforementioned prejudice. First of all, you should know that the region is huge and far from homogeneous. It is true that there are many common issues, but the reality in the countries that make up the region in relation to Jewish life are absolutely diverse. You cannot unify a criteria to talk about a huge territory that stretched from Mexico all the way to Antarctica. It is not the same to talk about Panama, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Chile, Uruguay, or Argentina, to name a few examples. To understand a little more what we are up against, we have to know that anti-Semitism is not just talking about Nazis. Hate, my dear friends, is not exclusively to the right. It's ambidextrous. Today, anti-Semitism has various representations. The traditional one that came from the most tale of the teaching of Catholicism, that came to America dragging the teachings of the Inquisition, went deep in a region where Spanish and Portuguese colonized as an extension of their territories. During the first half of the 20th century, subsequent Nazi-sympathetic local government helped keep that kind of thinking going. The strengthening of democracies since the middle of the 1980s, together with the end of the usual military governments, as well as the work that the Church has carried out since the Second Vatican Council in the 60s, recognizing the Jews as the older brothers is causing the effect of making gradually reducing prejudices. Today, interreligious dialogue, the succession of popes who have reflected a sense closeness to Judaism, and clear and concrete rejections of anti-Semitism, as well as the improvement in the quality of democracy in the region, contribute to decline this type of anti-Semitism. Today, that traditional anti-Semitism has a marginal presence in societies depending on the existence or lack thereof of laws that make it possible to defend against discrimination. There are countries that have very advanced law in the regard, and others do not even have one. Paraguay, for example, lacks anti-discrimination law. At various times we had to resort to government embassies such as the German one and certain media to prevent Hitler's anniversary from being celebrated, or some showing that glorifies Nazism. There are demonstrations that this type of anti-Semitism exists, but, I reiterate, the law allows attacking them. Example of this, although these groups are growing in Brazil, at the same time the denial of the Shoah is a crime, and the law allows Jewish institutions and democracies to prosecute these demonstrations. One of the most manifestations of anti-Semitism masquerades as anti-Zionism. I want to say it clearly, attacking the legitimacy of the State of Israel, blaming it by saying that everything it does is naturally bad, or asking it for measures that they are not required for any other country in the world is anti-Semitic. It is the famous, I have nothing against Jews, but. That but is grammatically a negative conjunction. Everything that comes after that but is negative. Usually, those who support this kind of thinking tend to support the concept of self-determination of peoples. If they firmly believe that all the peoples of the earth can determine themselves except one, and they have problems only with that particularly one, which is precisely the only Jewish state, they cannot continue to maintain that they do not have anti-Jewish prejudice. They are anti-Semitic and should be assumed as such. This is a type of anti-Semitism that is difficult to prevent and repel because we Jews are not fully aware of it and we lack the element to confront it. Another danger we combat is the presence of Iran in Latin America. The Cold War showed us that how the Soviet presence, absolutely foreign to the region, permanently modified it. Today, Iran, with an openly anti-Semitic, anti-democratic, misogynistic, and expansionist government, maintains a very dangerous policy of expansion in Latin America. We have already referred to the terrorist attack carried out in the 90s. At that time, they operated clandestinely from the triple border between Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. Today, they do not need to hide because they act in full view of their ally in Venezuela, and they have freedom to act in Bolivia. From having delivered more than 150 Mercosur passports to Hezbollah agents before its suspension as a member, going through the transfer of more than 1 million hectares of territory to joint institutions, in addition to daily flights between Tehran and Caracas. Hispan TV channel, which grew in Spain at the hand of the Podemos leaders, became a very dangerous fake news factory. Faced this situation, I want to highlight some examples that the allotted time allows me, without pretending, of course, to exhaust the subject, which, thanks to social media, give us the possibility of being in contact and continuing with this relationship that we begin today between all of us, present, and our institution. We invite you to follow us and communicate with us to expand this subject. I mentioned some examples must be emphasized. Colombia, for example, is undoubtedly entering a new stage that forces us to be vigilant. It never had serious problems with anti-Semitism, but the openly anti-Zionist stance of the Petro government should raise high levels of alert. We must work from now on, as we do, close to the Jewish community of Colombia, so that this policy generates undesirable reactions. There are Jewish communities in the region that wrongly, in my opinion, have the policy of not raising their voices and trying to cover up any manifestation of anti-Semitism, understanding that if they see us, anti-Semitism will grow. I say that this is wrong because if we silently allow anti-Semitic narrative to spread, the day we want to contradict them will be already too late because they will have penetrated deep in the unconscious of the non-Jewish population. One of the countries that deserve most attention is Chile, where all the elements generate big worries. The Pinochet dictatorship was not forced to leave, but left behind a high degree of approval, with a component of traditional anti-Semitism still present today. In turn, the largest Palestinian community outside the Arab world lives in Chile, with approximately 400,000 people who perceive themselves as such. The Jewish community is no larger than 20,000. Which recently had a very low profile. They have always lived in peace and harmony until 2014. At that time, the leadership of the Palestinian community became radicalized and identified with the thinking of Hamas, importing the Middle East conflict into the country. These allies, with an openly leftist, anti-Zionist, generate constant situation of harassment of the small Jewish community, especially in universities, where young Jews who have just left their protected environment do not have enough elements to defend themselves against attacks they do not understand. Lastly, I want to speak for a few minutes about Argentina, the country with the largest Jewish population in the region. The attacks of the 1990s forced to raise the profile in the institution of the Jewish communities, which has a strong presence in all the media and acts as soon as necessary. In turn, the 40 years of uninterrupted democracy begin to generate positive effects. The fight against anti-Semitism is a policy of the whole country and not depend on political parties. Since 1988, there has been in place an anti-discrimination law that has irregular application. This is changing for good in the last 3 years. An international institution made up of 35 countries, not a Jewish institution, by the way, called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, created a definition of anti-Semitism in 2016. This allows us to confirm when we are facing a situation of this type in order to be able to teach, plan, form policies, and eventually punish. What beforehand needed to be interpreted to see if it was anti-Semitic or not, that is a subjective criteria, today has been transformed into an objective situation. If the definition fits, it is an anti-Semitic act. Argentina adopted the definition in 2020, and since then our institution has worked so that 18 of the 24 districts have approved as law. Universities, bar associations, the Argentine Soccer Association, Workers' Union, and other civil organizations have committed to this. Since 2021 and 22, during 21 and 22, this has been translated into conviction in the judicial courts because judges apply the definition as a complementary argument to the anti-discrimination law. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance recognized our work in Argentina, qualifying it as the country that has made the most progress in the world in the fight against anti-Semitism, a fact of which we are extremely proud of. The definition was also adopted by Uruguay, Guatemala, and Colombia. The next few days, we'll see if it's our hope, we will see how other countries join the list. We want to work to expand. We plan to put together a manual so every public official in Latin America knows how to deal with an anti-Semitic situation. We want to be proactive, as Vicental taught us. We need everyone's support because this fight belongs to each of us. The greatest lesson that the 20th century has left us is that anti-Semite is confronted and it's not allowed to grow. So says the partisans' anthem, Mir seinen Do. We are here, Shabbat Shalom.
I know you're accustomed to the accent already for the last 19 years, but this was amazing. I heard Dr. Gelblung in Spanish before, and now my respect is even higher, way to communicate. So this is a holy job. This is a very risky job because in every corner in Latin America, you need to fight for anti-Semitism, which is not new now, unfortunately, in our country here in the United States. When we finish our presentation, I asked the audience in the chapel to rise because I wanted to show them something that I don't know if you're aware of. We have in the other chapel the last Torah that left the country of Nicaragua, which means a Jew who came to Miami because he knows that we have a heavy Latin American population in Beth Torah, says, you know what, there's no more Jews there, this is the Torah, it belongs to you. So thank you to the job of the center, of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and specifically to the executive director. They are trying to make sure that every Jew who wants to live in those countries can say whatever they want, whenever they want, and nobody should stop them because they are Jews, which is not easy. You know, you understand, when you live hundreds of years in a country, this is your country. And when somebody comes with a finger, they want to tell you that you are not, so you need organizations to remind them that they are in the right time and in the right place. And those who don't want them there, those are the ones who are on the wrong side of the history. So thank you again, Dr. Gelblung. So, Kentor, besides babysitting now, what's the next step in the service? Because I missed that. Aleinu. So please rise for Aleinu if you're able to. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שמיים ויסד הארץ ומשה והרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגובי מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו ופזולתו ככתוב בתורתו ידעת היום וישבות אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד זקן עולם מלכות שדי ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Before we conclude the morning Kaddish, allow me to name those people that our members, partners, will be observing Yortzeit for them during the week. Leda Korenstein, Jacobo Beloglovsky, Joseph Siklik, Lou Wax, William Krell, Maurice Young, Leonard Topchik, Manfred Hagen, Maurice Stein, Rhoda Schutzman, Maurice Liebman, Raquel Reutblatt, Rosa Spielberg, Marion Hagen, Sima Friedman, Rose Wutzelman, Nathan Weinman, Bernice White, A.B. Altschuler, and Bernardo Gittelman. May all those people who remember today continue to be inspirations for generations to come. Amen. Morning Kaddish 207. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דיברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יש שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולמעלמיה יתברך, וישתבח, ויתפאר, ויתרומם, ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה, בריחו, לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמידן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום עם ברומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. You can be seated, our president, Michael Kotzen.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Thank you to our clergy. Thank you to our wonderful guest speaker, Ariel Gelblung, who did double duty today, speaking in English and in Spanish. Just a quick PSA, we have a lost book. Maybe? Oh, that's ours, never mind. I was going to say we have a lost child, but I think he found out where he's supposed to be too. Let's see. First of all, happy birthday to Marla. Yom Huledet Sameach. Yom Huledet Sameach. Yom Huledet Sameach. Yom Huledet Sameach. Marla is our wonderful executive assistant to the clergy, and we already did happy birthday to it, Garner, but we can do it again. Cumpleaños feliz, cumpleaños feliz, cumpleaños feliz. Happy birthday to you. Okay, so some really quick announcements. We have one of our most amazing Shabbat services of the year next Friday night, which is Gospel Shabbat. I know most of you have been before, but if you haven't, it's really, really wonderful. That's next Friday on January 20th. And the Saturday after that, January 21st, we have our Sisterhood Shabbat service, which is also a wonderful event. January 23rd, our adult education program is always wonderful. We have Elaine here, who's been running it for many, many years. Hugo is here now, who's running it now. And it's a really unique program on January 23rd, because usually we have somebody who's teaching who's been around the block. And this time we have a 22-year-old who is Edgardo's son, Alan, who is going to be speaking on understanding the Talmud. It's via Zoom only, so don't come here, right? You only by Zoom at home. Alan is a rabbinical student in Jerusalem, so he's certainly very well qualified to teach you how to understand the Talmud. January 29th, we have Sisterhood Game Day at 10 o'clock in the morning. February 4th, we have our adult B'nai Mitzvah ceremony here on Shabbat morning. And on March 11th, as you all know, we have our annual event gala honoring Marshall and Rochelle Baltic, Jenny Buchholz, and Warren Zinn. If you haven't done so already, please RSVP for the event. Please place your ads in the ad journal. And again, thank you to everybody who helped make this service work. Thank you to our Torah readers. Thank you to Cantor for reading the Haftorah, to Stephen for being our wonderful Gabbai. And thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Let's conclude with the Adon Olam in page 211.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא יהיה נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני להמשילו להגבירה בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, בצור חבלי ויצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנוסי ביום מקרא, בידו הפקיד רוחי, בידי שן והעירה, ועם רוחי גבייתי, אדוני לי ולא Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat Shalom.